I stared at the documents on my desk, my hand steady as I signed the final page. The words Liquidation Proceedings and Evergreen Solutions seemed to pulse on the crisp legal paper. My attorney, Olivia, waited patiently as I completed my signature. Rebecca, Taylor, now the majority shareholder of my soon-to-be ex-husband's company. The irony wasn't lost on me. Exactly 1 year ago, Daniel had handed me divorce papers over what was supposed to be our anniversary dinner, a cruel smile playing on his lips as he informed me our 15-year marriage was over. "You'll get what the prenup allows," he'd said, dismissively. "It's more than generous for someone who's been just a housewife for the past decade." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now, as I slid the signed liquidation notice across the polished conference table, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of closure. The woman Daniel had so easily dismissed as just a housewife now controlled the fate of the company he had sacrificed our marriage to build. The look on Olivia's face mirrored my own quiet satisfaction. This wasn't just about revenge, though. I couldn't deny that sweetness. This was about proving something to myself, that I was always more than the box he tried to put me in. 15 years earlier, I met Daniel at a tech industry mixer in downtown Portland. I was finishing my MBA, graduating top of my class with job offers from several prestigious firms. He was charismatic, ambitious, and determined to launch his own tech consultancy. We connected immediately over our shared vision of building something meaningful in the emerging tech landscape of the Pacific Northwest. Daniel admired my strategic mind, often saying my business instincts were what attracted him most. "With your brain and my drive, we'll conquer the world," he'd say, his eyes bright with possibility. Our courtship was a whirlwind of late nights discussing business models, weekend trips to Cannon Beach where we'd sketch ideas in the sand, and passionate debates about market trends. 6 months after meeting, he proposed on the rooftop garden of the Liberty Hotel, overlooking the twinkling lights of Portland. "We'll be partners in everything," he promised as he slipped the ring onto my finger. "Your success will be my success, and mine yours." Those early years of marriage lived up to that promise. I took a position at a venture capital firm while Daniel worked to get Evergreen Solutions off the ground. We transformed our modest apartment into a makeshift headquarters, our dining table often buried beneath business plans and market research. I helped refine his pitches, connected him with potential investors from my network, and spent weekends helping him prepare for crucial meetings. When he secured his first major client, we celebrated together, knowing it was our shared victory. Everything changed when Lily was born. The pregnancy had been difficult, severe morning sickness that lasted all day, complications that required bed rest for the final trimester. Daniel had been supportive initially, assuring me that my health and our baby's well-being came first. "Take the time you need," he said. "Your job will be waiting, and Evergreen is gaining momentum. We're a team, remember?" But as months passed, and Evergreen Solutions expanded, Daniel's attitude subtly shifted. When I mentioned returning to work after my maternity leave, he frowned. "Is that really necessary? Lily needs stability right now, and I'm working crazy hours. We can't both be absent." His reasoning seemed logical, caring even. "Besides," he added, kissing my forehead, "you're so good with her. I could never connect with her the way you do." What started as a temporary arrangement became our new normal. Each time I brought up returning to my career, Daniel found reasons why now wasn't the right time. Meanwhile, Evergreen Solutions grew rapidly, moving from our apartment to a sleek downtown office. Daniel's confidence grew with his success, morphing gradually into something uglier: arrogance. The intellectual partnership that had defined our early relationship faded. Our dinner conversations, once filled with mutual exchange of ideas, became monologues where Daniel detailed his latest business triumph or networking coup. He'd ask about my day only as an afterthought, barely listening to stories about Lily's development or the volunteer work I'd taken on at her school. The subtle shift was almost imperceptible day to day, but looking back, I could see how systematically my voice had been silenced in our relationship. 7 years into our marriage, with Lily in school full-time, I decided to put my financial expertise to use by managing our personal investments. I'd kept up with industry trends, taken online courses during Lily's nap times, and maintained relationships with former colleagues. Over 3 months, I developed a comprehensive investment strategy that I believed could significantly grow our portfolio while minimizing risk. One evening, after Lily was asleep, I spread my research across our dining table, the same table where we'd once collaborated on Daniel's business plans. I'd prepared detailed analyses, charts tracking potential growth trajectories, and a presentation outlining my recommendations. I've been analyzing some investment opportunities, I began, pulling up a spreadsheet on my laptop. There's a pattern in these emerging clean energy companies that suggests. Daniel barely glanced at my work before cutting me off with a dismissive wave. Becca, what is this? Playing financial advisor now? He flipped through my carefully prepared analyses with casual disregard. This isn't a game, you know. These decisions require actual market experience. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. I have an MBA and worked in venture capital for 4 years, Dan. This isn't me playing at anything. His expression softened into something worse than dismissal: pity. That was before Lily. The market has changed dramatically since then. You've been out of the loop, focused on. He gestured vaguely. Other things. Being home with our daughter doesn't mean my brain stopped working, I countered, struggling. To keep my voice steady, Daniel sighed, checking his watch. Look, I appreciate the effort, but let's be realistic. You're a housewife now, a wonderful one, and that's important. But leave the investment decisions to me. I do this every day. He gathered his things and headed toward his home office. I have a client presentation tomorrow. Can you make sure my navy suit is pressed? That night, lying awake beside him, I realized how far we had drifted from the partnership we'd promised each other. We'd become something else entirely, a hierarchy where my value was measured by how well I supported his ambitions while surrendering my own. For months, I tried to revive our relationship. I suggested couples therapy, planned date nights, and attempted to engage Daniel in meaningful conversations about our future together. But Evergreen Solutions had become his entire identity, transforming him into someone who saw relationships as transactions and people as either assets or liabilities. I don't have time for this right now, became his standard response to any issue I raised. The company needs me. The breaking point came during a dinner party we hosted for Daniel's investors and business associates. I'd spent days preparing our home, planning the menu, and ensuring everything was perfect to support Daniel's business relationships. During dinner, one of the investors' wives, Eleanor Wilson, a successful investment banker herself, asked about my background. Rebecca has a brilliant financial mind, Eleanor commented after I explained a current market trend during appetizers. You should have her take a look at Evergreen's investment strategy, Daniel. Before I could respond, Daniel laughed loudly, placing his hand on mine in what appeared affectionate but felt controlling. Becca's too busy managing our home to worry about corporate strategy, he said with a dismissive smile. She's just a housewife these days, and an excellent one. I couldn't do what I do without her support. The table nodded appreciatively at his apparent gratitude, but I felt invisible. Later that night, after everyone had left and I was cleaning up alone, Daniel had retreated to make important calls. I found myself staring at my reflection in a serving platter, barely recognizing the woman looking back at me. 3 weeks later, Daniel and I had reservations at Le Jardin, an upscale French restaurant downtown, to celebrate our anniversary. I'd spent the day at the salon, bought a new dress, and even prepared a small gift, a vintage compass I'd found at an antique shop inscribed with 2 new adventures together. I still believed we could find our way back to each other. Daniel arrived late, distracted, barely commenting on my appearance. Throughout the appetizer, he checked his phone repeatedly. When the main course arrived, he finally put his phone down and reached into his jacket pocket. "I've been thinking about our future," he said, sliding an envelope across the table instead of the jewelry box I'd half expected. Inside were divorce papers, already filled out with his information, waiting only for my signature. My hands trembled. As I skimmed the documents, he'd already consulted with attorneys, already decided the terms. "Evergreen is moving into international markets," he explained calmly, as if discussing a business merger rather than the end of our marriage. "I need to focus completely on this expansion. We've grown apart, Becca. You want different things than I do." I sat in stunned silence as he continued. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I've been working with Sarah from our marketing department on the European strategy. She understands the demands of my position. She's in the trenches with me every day. The implications were clear. Not only was he ending our marriage, but he'd already found my replacement, someone who was in the trenches with him, as I had once been. "The prenup is clear," he added, misinterpreting my silence for financial concern. "You'll get the vacation property at Cannon Beach, a reasonable settlement, and child support for Lily. The house stays with me. It's too close to Evergreen's headquarters to make sense for you." He spoke as if he were being generous, as if the years I'd invested in his success and in raising our daughter could be quantified and settled with reasonable compensation. "I need your answer by the end of the week," he said, signaling for the check without ordering dessert. "My lawyers advised that we could make this quick and painless if you cooperate." The divorce was neither quick nor painless. Daniel's lawyers painted me as a supported spouse who had chosen to leave the workforce, conveniently overlooking my contributions to Evergreen's early success and the years spent managing our household so Daniel could focus exclusively on his business. The settlement was minimal compared to the wealth Daniel had accumulated, just enough to maintain a modest lifestyle for Lily and me for a few years. "You'll be fine," he said as I signed the final papers in his attorney's office, handing me a check that felt like a final dismissal. "You're smart. You'll figure something out." As I walked out, clutching that insultingly small check, something inside me shifted. The hurt and betrayal began to crystallize into something harder, more determined. I wasn't just a housewife. I never had been. And Daniel Taylor was about to learn exactly what I was capable of. The first month after the divorce was the hardest. I moved Lily and myself into a 2-bedroom apartment in Cedar Park, a stark contrast to the 5-bedroom house in Westridge Heights we'd left behind. On the nights when Lily stayed with me, we made it an adventure, building pillow forts in the bow living room and pretending we were explorers in a new land. But when she returned to Daniel's for his visitation weekends, the silence was deafening. "Mommy, why is Daddy's house so much bigger?" Lily asked innocently after one weekend. She was only 11, too young to understand the complexities of divorce settlements and asset division. "Different houses are good for different things," I told her, keeping my voice light. "Our apartment is just the right size for cozy movie nights and making memories." But after tucking her into bed that night, I sat at my tiny kitchen table and faced the brutal reality of my situation. The settlement money would run out quickly. I needed to rebuild my career after an 8-year gap in an industry that moved at lightning speed. Daniel had kept all our social connections, most of whom were tied to Evergreen. And worst of all, I had lost confidence in myself. For a week, I allowed myself to grieve. For my marriage, for the years I'd spent supporting Daniel's dreams at the expense of my own, for the woman I used to be. I scrolled through social media, watching Daniel and Sarah attend industry events, their smiles a painful reminder of how quickly I'd been replaced, both personally and professionally. Then one morning, I came across an article about Evergreen Solutions' latest acquisition, a promising clean energy startup called GreenSpark Technologies. I froze, recognizing the name immediately. GreenSpark had been featured prominently in my investment research, the very research Daniel had mocked. According to the article, the acquisition was expected to boost Evergreen's portfolio considerably, exactly as I had projected it would. I stared at my screen, a strange feeling washing over me. It wasn't just anger or resentment, it was validation. I had been right despite being out of the loop for years. My analysis had been spot on. Daniel had dismissed my insights, yet here he was, profiting from the very opportunity I had identified. That was the moment everything changed. I closed my social media apps, opened a fresh document on my laptop, and began to write. Not a letter to Daniel or a journal entry to vent my frustrations, but a business plan. If my investment instincts were still sharp enough to identify valuable acquisitions, then perhaps they were sharp enough to build something new. I started researching the current investment landscape, analyzing how it had evolved since I'd left the workforce. I identified gaps in the market, underserved niches that larger firms were overlooking. Using a portion of my settlement as seed, capital was risky with Lily to consider, but playing it safe hadn't exactly worked in my favor so far. For the next 3 months, I lived on a strict budget. When Lily was with Daniel, I worked around the clock, reconnecting with old colleagues from business school, taking online courses to update my skills, and refining my business concept. I targeted a specific niche, innovative companies with promising environmental technologies that were being overlooked due to being led by non-traditional founders, women, minorities, older entrepreneurs who didn't fit the typical Silicon Valley mold. My first major obstacle was finding investors willing to back me. My resume showed an 8-year gap, and when I mentioned I was recently divorced, I could see potential partners making assumptions about my emotional stability and commitment. After 15 rejections, I changed my approach. Rather than seeking large sums from established venture capitalists, I reached out to successful women entrepreneurs who might understand both my vision and my journey. I created detailed analyses of overlooked investment opportunities, demonstrating the untapped potential that my firm would target. Eleanor Wilson, the investment banker from Daniel's dinner party, was the first to take a meeting with me. She had faced similar skepticism when starting her own firm as a divorced woman in her 40s. "Your analysis is impressive," she said, reviewing my presentation in the quiet corner of the Daily Grind coffee shop. "But what makes you think you can compete with established firms after being out of the game so long?" It was the question everyone had been dancing around, finally stated plainly. I appreciated her directness. "Because I've been watching from the outside," I replied. "I've seen how groupthink leads to missed opportunities, how firms overlook founders who don't fit their preconceived notions of success. I've experienced firsthand what it means to be underestimated, and I know how to recognize potential in places others don't bother to look." Eleanor studied me for a long moment before nodding. "I'll invest, on one condition. You bring in at least 2 other strategic partners. I need to know this isn't just about proving something to your ex-husband." Her words stung because they cut close to home. Was this about Daniel? Partly, I had to admit. But it was about so much more, about reclaiming my identity, creating something meaningful, and hopefully changing an industry that too often overlooked talent that didn't fit the established mold. "This is about building something that should exist," I told her, whether Daniel ever knows about it or not. With Eleanor's conditional commitment, I had credibility to approach others. Jessica Martinez, a tech entrepreneur who had sold her cybersecurity company for millions, signed on next. Then came Marcus Chen, an early investor in several successful green technology startups who liked my focus on overlooked founders. Within 2 months, I had assembled a small but powerful group of backers who believed in my vision. Phoenix Ventures, launched with modest capital but a clear mission. We focused on companies with solid fundamentals that weren't getting attention from larger firms. Our first investment was in a water purification technology developed by a team of former environmental scientists, women in their 50s who understood water systems but had been repeatedly told they were too old to enter the tech space. When their platform was acquired by a major environmental services provider 18 months later, delivering a 250% return to our investors, Phoenix Ventures suddenly had industry attention. My phone started ringing with calls from people who had previously declined meetings. 3 years after the divorce, Phoenix had grown from my kitchen table operation to a boutique investment firm with a small but dedicated team working from our converted warehouse office space in the Arts District. We had a reputation for spotting unconventional talent and a track record of successful investments. I was finally rebuilding my professional identity piece by piece. Lily, now 14, often visited the office after school. She had her own small desk where she would do homework while I finished work. "I told Dad about your company," she mentioned casually one afternoon. "He said it sounds interesting." My heart skipped a beat. "Did he? What else did he say?" Lily shrugged, focused on her science project. "Not much. He seemed surprised, though. Sarah asked if you had real investors or if it was just a small thing you were doing to stay busy." I smiled, turning back to my computer. "And what did you tell them?" "I said you're the boss and you have meetings all day with important people," she replied proudly, "and that you let me have the good chair when I visit." That night, after Lily was asleep, I found myself looking up Evergreen Solutions online. The company had continued to grow under Daniel's leadership. They had made several more acquisitions, expanded internationally as planned, and according to industry news, were preparing for a potential IPO within the next year. Daniel's professional success didn't bother me as much as it once might have. I was building something of my own now, something that reflected my values and vision. Still, a small part of me wondered if he ever thought about how quickly he had written me off, how confidently he had labeled me just a housewife, as if those years at home had erased my intelligence and potential. 5 years after the divorce, Phoenix Ventures had established itself as a respected player in the investment world. We had expanded our focus beyond early-stage investments to include growth-stage companies with proven concepts ready to scale. Our fund had grown significantly, allowing us to take larger positions in the companies we believed in. I was reviewing potential new investments when Marcus knocked on my office door. "You need to see this," he said, placing a file on my desk. "Evergreen Solutions is facing some serious challenges." I opened the folder to find a comprehensive analysis of Daniel's company. After years of aggressive expansion, Evergreen had taken on significant debt. Several of their recent acquisitions weren't performing as projected, and there were rumors that the planned IPO had been postponed indefinitely. Their privately traded stock had dropped nearly 30% in 6 months. "Their board is divided on next steps," Marcus continued. "Half want to restructure, cut costs, and stabilize. The other half, including your ex-husband, want to double down with more acquisitions to boost their portfolio before going public." I studied the numbers carefully, seeing the precarious position Evergreen was in. Daniel's strategy had always been aggressive growth at all costs. It had served him well during the tech boom, but the market was shifting toward sustainability and responsible growth models, exactly the approach Phoenix had championed from the beginning. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Marcus smiled slightly. "Their largest investor is looking to exit. They're quietly shopping their 28% stake. It wouldn't give us control, but it would make us the largest single shareholder, enough to influence the board's direction." I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing with possibilities. 5 years ago, I couldn't have imagined being in a position to even consider such a move. Now, it was actually within reach. Get me everything you can on Evergreen's current situation, I said. Board composition, debt structure, employee retention rates, client satisfaction metrics, the works. And find out what price the investor is looking for. As Marcus left my office, I turned to the window, watching the city skyline as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows between buildings. I wasn't interested in revenge. That emotion had faded years ago as I built Phoenix. But there was something poetic about potentially saving the company Daniel had built using the very financial acumen he had dismissed. Would I move forward with this? I wasn't sure yet, but for the first time since the divorce, I felt the playing field between Daniel and me leveling out. And it felt good to have options. Options I had created for myself by refusing to accept the limitations he had tried to place on me. That evening, as I helped Lily with her math homework, my phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Investor willing to discuss terms. Meeting set for next week. I set my phone down, smiling to myself as I turned back to my daughter. The woman Daniel had dismissed as just a housewife was about to make the most important business decision of her career. And whatever I decided, it would be on my terms. The week before my meeting with Evergreen's exiting investor, I barely slept. The potential acquisition consumed my thoughts. Each night after Lily went to bed, I pored over the research Marcus and our team had compiled, looking for angles I might have missed. Evergreen's financials told a clear story. Daniel had prioritized expansion over sustainability. The company had acquired 23 smaller firms in just 4 years, taking on substantial debt with each purchase. While revenue had grown impressively, profits hadn't kept pace with the increasing debt service. It was a house of cards that had begun to wobble. "Are you okay, Mom?" Lily asked over breakfast one morning, studying my face with concern. "You look tired." I smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Just some big decisions at work, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it about Dad's company?" she asked, surprising me with her perceptiveness. At 14, she was becoming increasingly aware of the complexities in the adult world around her. I hesitated, unsure how much to share. "What makes you ask that?" She shrugged, pushing her cereal around in her bowl. "I heard Dad arguing with Sarah last night. He sounded stressed about work stuff." A pang of worry shot through me. Whatever my feelings about Daniel, I never wanted Lily caught in the middle of business tensions on top of the normal challenges of having divorced parents. "Business can be stressful sometimes," I said carefully, "but that's for grown-ups to handle. You just focus on being 14. Okay?" She nodded, but the concern lingered in her eyes. "If you helped Dad's company, would that make things better?" The innocent question struck me deeply. Lily wasn't asking about market share or return on investment. She was asking if I could fix something that was causing strain in her other home. For her, this wasn't about business strategy or personal vindication. It was about the people she loved. "It's complicated, honey," I said finally, "but I promise I'll think about what's best for everyone." That conversation stayed with me as I prepared for the meeting with Richard Donovan, the investor looking to exit Evergreen Solutions. His firm, Summit Capital, had been Evergreen's first major backer, the one that had given Daniel his big break when Evergreen was just a promising startup. Their decision to pull out now would be a significant blow, both financially and symbolically. Richard was waiting when I arrived at Harborview, the upscale restaurant where we'd arranged to meet. He rose to greet me, his expression revealing nothing. "Rebecca, thank you for coming," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I must admit, when your name came up as a potential buyer, I was intrigued." We ordered drinks and made polite small talk until the waiter left us alone. Then Richard leaned forward, his demeanor shifting from cordial to businesslike. "Let's not dance around this," he said. "You know why I'm selling." and I know your connection to Evergreen. The question is whether this is a business decision for you or something more personal. I met his gaze steadily. Would it matter if it were both? He considered this, swirling his scotch. It might. I've been with Evergreen since the beginning. Daniel Taylor may have his flaws, but he built something valuable. I wouldn't want to see that destroyed out of spite. Spite would be a poor investment strategy, I replied. I'm interested in Evergreen because I see potential that's being squandered. The company has strong core assets, valuable intellectual property, and talented teams. What it lacks is prudent financial management and a sustainable growth model. Richard studied me for a long moment. You've done your homework. I always do. He nodded, seeming satisfied. Here's my situation. I need to liquidate this position to fund other commitments, but I'm not desperate enough to accept just any offer, and I won't trigger a fire sale that tanks the company's value. What's your timeline? I asked. 60 days ideally, 90 at the outside. I took a sip of my drink, calculating. And what about the right of first refusal clause in your investment agreement? Daniel will fight to block any sale to me. Richard smiled for the first time that evening. That's where things get interesting. The clause expired during the last round of financing, an oversight in the new terms. Daniel can't legally block a sale, though he'll certainly try to outbid you if he finds out you're the buyer. The revelation changed everything. If Daniel couldn't block the sale, my primary obstacle was simply having the capital to make a competitive offer. Phoenix had grown substantially, but acquiring a 28% stake in Evergreen would require resources beyond what we currently had available. I'm assuming you've had other inquiries, I said. Several, but most are waiting to see if Evergreen resolves its current challenges before committing. You're the only one who seems eager to jump in now. Sometimes the best opportunities come disguised as problems, I replied. By the time we finished dinner, Richard had given me a clear picture of his expectations. His asking price was high, but not unreasonable given Evergreen's underlying assets. He would give Phoenix exclusive negotiating rights for 30 days, provided we could show proof of funds or committed financing. As I drove home that night, my mind was already working on how to structure the deal. Phoenix would need partners. We couldn't do this alone, not without risking everything we'd built. But with the right consortium of investors, we could make a compelling offer. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with my executive team. Marcus, Jessica, Eleanor, and our CFO Aiden gathered in the conference room as I laid out the opportunity. Evergreen Solutions is vulnerable, but still valuable, I explained, pointing to the projections on the screen. With the right restructuring and a shift in strategy, we could not only recover our investment, but potentially double it within 3 years. Marcus looked skeptical. That's assuming we can implement those changes. Even as the largest shareholder, we'd still be facing resistance from the current management, including your ex-husband. He's right, Jessica added. Daniel will fight any interference, especially from you. This could get messy, professionally and personally. I knew they were right to be concerned. This wasn't a typical acquisition target. The personal history complicated everything. I understand the risks, I said, but I also see an opportunity that aligns perfectly with our investment thesis. Evergreen has acquired some of the most innovative teams in the environmental technology space, then burdened them with unrealistic growth targets and insufficient resources. We can liberate that talent, streamline operations, and build something more sustainable. Aiden, who had been quietly reviewing the financials, finally spoke. The numbers support your analysis, but we'd need to raise significant capital. We'd be putting a lot of eggs in one basket. Which is why I'm proposing we form a consortium, I replied. Phoenix would lead, but we'd bring in partners to distribute the risk and provide additional expertise. By the end of the meeting, we had agreed to move forward with exploring the acquisition. Aiden would work on the financial modeling, Marcus would identify potential partners, And Jessica would help me craft the strategic vision for Evergreen post-acquisition. Over the next 2 weeks, we approached several potential investors who had worked with Phoenix in the past. Some were immediately interested, seeing the same potential we did. Others were hesitant, concerned about the company's debt load and the potential for a protracted battle with current management. Victor Reynolds, who had been one of my early backers at Phoenix, was particularly enthusiastic. "I've been watching Evergreen for years," he said during our pitch meeting. "Daniel Taylor built an impressive business, but he's been making increasingly risky bets. The company needs a new direction before it's too late." With Victor's support and commitments from 4 other investors, we had secured enough funding to make a competitive offer. I called Richard to arrange the final negotiation meeting. The night before the meeting, I found myself standing in Lily's doorway, watching her sleep. Whatever happened with Evergreen would impact her too. Daniel was still her father, and his financial and professional stability mattered to her well-being. I needed to remember that, to make decisions that wouldn't unnecessarily harm him, even as I pursued this opportunity. The next morning, as I prepared to leave for the meeting, Lily caught me at the door. "Good luck, Mom," she said, giving me a tight hug. "I know you'll do the right thing." Her faith in me was both comforting and terrifying. What was the right thing in this situation? Was I pursuing Evergreen because it truly represented the best investment opportunity for Phoenix? Or was I still trying to prove something to Daniel and to myself? The question lingered as I drove to Summit Capital's offices. Richard was waiting. With his legal team, his expression neutral as he greeted me. "Before we finalize anything," he said as we sat down, "there's something you should know. Daniel called me yesterday. Somehow he's heard rumors about a potential sale." My heart sank. "Does he know I'm the buyer?" "No, but he's scrambling to find funds to make a competing offer. He won't be able to match your price, but he's trying to leverage his position as founder and CEO to persuade our board that selling to him at a lower price is in the company's best interest." I nodded, absorbing this new information. "And what does your board think?" Richard sighed. "They're divided. Some see Daniel as the safer choice despite the lower offer. Others are purely focused on the financial return." "And you?" "I'm focused on closing this deal quickly and cleanly," he replied. "But I need to be sure you won't back out if things get complicated." I took a deep breath, thinking about Lily's words that morning. The right thing wasn't always the easiest path. Sometimes it meant making difficult choices with uncertain outcomes. "I won't back out," I said firmly. "But I want to be clear about something. My goal isn't to destroy Evergreen or to humiliate Daniel. I want to preserve what's valuable about the company while correcting its course. That's best for everyone, the employees, the shareholders, and yes, even for Daniel in the long run, though he may not see it that way." Richard studied me for a long moment before nodding. "Then let's move forward." 3 hours later, after intensive negotiations and multiple calls with our respective legal teams, we had a deal. Phoenix Ventures, along with our consortium, would acquire Summit Capital's 28% stake in Evergreen Solutions. The paperwork would be finalized within a week, and the transaction would be announced immediately afterward. As I drove back to the office, I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and trepidation. After years of rebuilding my life and career from scratch, I was about to become the largest shareholder in the company that Daniel had sacrificed our marriage to build. The woman he had dismissed as just a housewife now held the future of his company in her hands. But power, I was learning, came with its own responsibilities. The decisions I made in the coming months would affect hundreds of employees, numerous shareholders, and yes, Daniel himself. This wasn't just about vindication anymore. It was about proving I could lead better than the man who thought I wasn't capable of leading at all. When I arrived at the office, Marcus was waiting with a grim expression. "What's wrong?" I asked immediately on alert. Daniel knows, he said. Somehow he found out the buyer is Phoenix. He's calling an emergency board meeting to try to block the sale. The battle I had anticipated was beginning sooner than expected, but I was ready. This time, I wouldn't be the one underestimated. How did he find out? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the adrenaline now coursing through me. One of Summit Capital's junior analysts let it slip during a due diligence call. Apparently, Daniel went ballistic, started shouting about conflicts of interest and personal vendettas. I sank into my office chair, mind racing. This changed everything. The element of surprise had been our advantage, allowing us to move methodically while Daniel remained unaware. Now we'd be facing active resistance, every step of the way. When is the emergency board meeting? Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., Marcus replied. Daniel's trying to convince the board that your involvement represents a personal conflict that threatens the company. He's trying to trigger the hostile actor clause. I realized he was referring to a common provision that allowed boards to block sales to entities deemed harmful to the company. But Summit's shares are privately held, I said. The board can't legally stop Richard from selling to whomever he chooses. They can't stop the sale, but they can make the transition. Difficult, Marcus warned. And they could potentially remove you as a shareholder later through a forced buyout if they can prove your actions are detrimental to the company. I nodded, understanding the strategy. If Daniel could convince the board that my involvement was motivated by personal revenge rather than business sense, he might be able to neutralize my influence or even force me out eventually. We need to get ahead of this, I said, reaching for my phone. I'm calling Richard. The conversation with Richard was tense but productive. He confirmed that Daniel had called him in a fury, threatening legal action and making various accusations about my motives. The deal is moving forward, Richard assured me. Legally, he doesn't have a leg to stand on, but politically, he's making waves with the other board members. What do you suggest? Attend the board meeting, he said simply. They've requested your presence anyway. Daniel's counting on painting you as the vindictive ex-wife in absentia. Don't give him that opportunity. After hanging up, I called Eleanor as one of my key investors and advisors. I needed her perspective. It's a trap, she warned. Daniel wants to provoke you into saying or doing something that confirms his narrative. I know, I agreed. But if I don't show up, I look guilty or cowardly. Then you go, but not alone, Eleanor insisted. You bring your legal counsel and financial team. You keep it strictly business, no matter what he says, no matter how personal he gets. You stick to the numbers. The next morning, I dressed with careful consideration, a conservative charcoal suit that projected competence and stability, not aggression. Marcus and our legal counsel, Olivia Barnes, met me in the lobby of Evergreen's headquarters. We reviewed our strategy one final time before heading up to the boardroom. The room fell silent as I entered. 10 board members sat around the massive conference table with Daniel at the head. Sarah was there too, sitting slightly behind him with a tablet, presumably taking notes. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me, but she quickly recovered. Her composure. Daniel looked different than I remembered. More lines around his eyes, his posture rigid with tension. For a brief moment, our eyes met, and I saw a flicker of something I couldn't quite identify. Surprise? Respect? Fear? Perhaps a combination of all three. The board chair, a silver-haired man named Robert Wilson, cleared his throat. Ms. Taylor, thank you for joining us on such short notice. I believe you know everyone here. I smiled politely. Thank you for accommodating me. Yes, I'm familiar with the board, though I haven't had the pleasure of meeting everyone personally. Daniel didn't wait for further pleasantries. Let's cut to the chase, he said, his voice tight. Rebecca, what exactly are you trying to accomplish by buying into Evergreen? I could feel every eye in the room on me, measuring my response. This was the moment Daniel hoped I would betray some personal motivation, some hint of revenge that would validate his narrative. "I'm representing Phoenix Ventures and our investment consortium," I replied evenly, opening my portfolio. "We see significant untapped value in Evergreen Solutions. The company has acquired excellent properties and talent, but is currently overleveraged and underperforming relative to its potential. Our analysis suggests that with strategic restructuring, Evergreen could significantly improve its profit margins and long-term stability." I proceeded to distribute copies of our analysis to each board member, including Daniel. The report was comprehensive, detailing Evergreen's financial challenges and our proposed solutions, complete with projected outcomes under various scenarios. "As you can see," I continued, "our interest is purely financial. Evergreen represents an undervalued asset with strong growth potential under the right management approach." Daniel's face darkened at the implication. "Under the right management? Are you suggesting the current leadership is inadequate?" I met his gaze directly. "The numbers speak for themselves, Daniel. Evergreen's debt-to-equity ratio has increased by 82% over the past 3 years. Your last 5 acquisitions have all missed their revenue targets. Meanwhile, your R&D spending has decreased by a third, jeopardizing your pipeline of new products." His jaw tightened. "We're in an aggressive growth phase. Short-term metrics don't reflect our long-term strategy. Growth without profitability isn't sustainable," I countered. "Your current trajectory puts Evergreen at risk of covenant violations on your loans within 2 years." One of the board members, an older woman I recognized as Dr. Helen Cooper, leaned forward. "Ms. Taylor, these projections are concerning. Are you confident in these numbers?" "Absolutely," I replied. "They're based on Evergreen's own quarterly reports and industry benchmarks. We've had 3 independent analysts verify them." Dr. Cooper turned to Daniel. "Is this accurate? Are we at risk of violating our loan covenants?" Daniel hesitated. "Just a fraction too long." "We have contingency plans in place. The situation isn't as dire as Ms. Taylor suggests." Another board member, who I hadn't met before, spoke up. "I'd like to hear more about Phoenix's restructuring proposal. What exactly would you change if you had influence over Evergreen's direction?" For the next 45 minutes, I outlined our vision for Evergreen, focusing on consolidating the recent acquisitions, optimizing operations, reducing redundancies, and reinvesting in the company's most promising technologies. I emphasized retaining key talent and creating a more sustainable growth model that wouldn't require constant fundraising. Throughout my presentation, Daniel interrupted repeatedly with objections and challenges, but I remained calm, addressing each point with data and reasoned analysis. I could sense the board's attention shifting, their skepticism giving way to genuine interest in our approach. "This all sounds promising," Robert said when I finished, "but it doesn't address the elephant in the room. Ms. Taylor, you and Mr. Taylor have a personal history. How can the board be confident that your involvement won't introduce conflicts that might harm the company?" It was the question I had been expecting, the one Daniel had undoubtedly planted. From the corner of my eye, I could see him leaning forward slightly, waiting for my response. "Mr. Wilson, I understand your concern," I said carefully. "Yes, Daniel and I were married. Yes, we have a daughter together. Those facts aren't in dispute. But Phoenix Ventures has built its reputation on identifying undervalued companies and helping them reach their full potential. My personal history gives me insight into Evergreen's operations, but it doesn't dictate our investment strategy." I paused, glancing around the table. If I were motivated by personal feelings, there are far easier ways to express them than committing millions in investment capital to a complex corporate restructuring. A few board members nodded, and I continued. "Moreover, our consortium includes respected investors like Victor Reynolds and Eleanor Wilson, who have their own reputations to protect. They wouldn't back this acquisition if they believed it was motivated by anything other than sound business principles. Daniel stood abruptly. This is absurd. Rebecca has no experience running a company of Evergreen size. Her firm is a boutique operation that's barely 5 years old. She's trying to use our past relationship to gain control over something she couldn't build herself. The comment stung, echoing the dismissive attitude that had characterized the end of our marriage. But I remained composed, refusing to take the bait. Phoenix Ventures has delivered an average annual return of 32% to our investors, I replied, keeping my voice measured. We've successfully guided multiple companies through restructuring and growth phases. Our track record speaks for itself. I turned to address the entire board. I'm not here to relitigate my divorce or engage in personal disputes. I'm here because Evergreen Solutions has tremendous potential that's currently being squandered by unsustainable practices. Either you address these issues now, with us as partners, or you'll be forced to address them later under far less favorable circumstances. The board chair called for a brief recess after that exchange. As people filed out of the room, Daniel approached me, his expression tightly controlled. "Can we speak privately?" he asked. I glanced at Marcus and Olivia, who looked concerned. "Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of my team, Daniel." He clenched his jaw but nodded. "Fine. What's your real game here, Rebecca? What do you actually want?" "Exactly what I said in there," I replied. "Evergreen is a good company making bad decisions. We want to fix that and generate returns for our investors. So this has nothing to do with proving me wrong? With showing that you weren't just a housewife after all?" His tone was mocking, but I detected something else beneath it, a genuine curiosity, perhaps even a grudging respect. "Daniel, not everything is about you," I said, surprising myself with the realization that I actually meant it. "This is business. Evergreen represents a good investment opportunity, provided certain changes are made. That's all." He studied me for a long moment, as if seeing me for the first time. "You've changed." "We both have," I acknowledged. "It's been 5 years." Before he could respond, the board members began returning to the room. As Daniel turned to walk away, he paused. "Lily told me your company is doing well," he said. She's proud of you." The comment caught me off guard, a rare moment of genuine communication between us. "Thank you for telling me that." The remainder of the meeting was less confrontational, but no less intense. The board questioned me thoroughly about our plans for Evergreen, our financial capacity, and our long-term vision. I answered each query directly, keeping the focus on business fundamentals rather than personal history. By the time the meeting concluded, it was clear that Daniel's attempt to paint me as a vindictive ex-wife had largely failed. Several board members expressed interest in further discussions about Phoenix's restructuring proposals, regardless of the share purchase. As we gathered our materials to leave, Dr. Cooper approached me. "That was impressive, Ms. Taylor," she said. "I've sat on this board for 6 years, and I've never heard anyone challenge Daniel so effectively on his growth strategy." "Thank you," I replied. "I hope the board will consider our perspective, regardless of how the share purchase plays out." She smiled knowingly. "Oh, I think that's a foregone conclusion now. Richard isn't going to back out of your deal, and after today's presentation, I doubt the rest of the board would want him to. You've made a compelling case." Outside the building, Marcus and Olivia were jubilant. "You were brilliant in there," Marcus said admiringly as we walked to our cars. "Did you see his face when you brought up the covenant violations? He never expected you to have that level of detail." "We still have a long way to go," I cautioned, even as I felt a surge of satisfaction. "The deal isn't closed yet, and even once it is, we'll be minority shareholders. Daniel will fight us every step of the way." Olivia shook her head. "After today, I'm not so sure. Several of those board members seemed very receptive to your analysis. Daniel's position isn't as secure as he thinks. As I drove back to the office, I replayed the meeting in my mind. It had gone better than I could have hoped, but something was nagging at me. The look in Daniel's eyes when he mentioned Lily, a mixture of pride and regret that had stirred feelings I thought were long buried. For years, I had channeled my hurt and anger into building Phoenix, proving to myself and eventually to Daniel that I was more than the box he had put me in. Now, on the verge of achieving what once seemed impossible, I found myself wondering what came next. If I succeeded in taking control of Evergreen, in reshaping the company Daniel had built, what would it really mean? The question followed me back to the office, where my team was eagerly awaiting news of the meeting. As I shared the details with them, I felt a growing certainty that this acquisition wasn't the end of my journey, but rather the beginning of a new chapter. One that would be defined not by what Daniel had once thought of me, but by what I chose to build for myself, for Lily, and for all the people who had believed in me when I was still learning to believe in myself. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Our legal team worked around the clock to finalize the acquisition documents, while our financial analysts prepared detailed transition plans. Meanwhile, I juggled my regular responsibilities at Phoenix with preparation for the challenges that would come once we officially became Evergreen's largest shareholder. Richard called on a Wednesday afternoon with the news I had been waiting for. "It's done," he said simply. The board approved the sale unanimously. Even Daniel voted in favor, though I suspect that was more about saving face than genuine support. "Thank you, Richard," I replied, surprised by the unanimity. I hadn't expected the entire board to back the deal. "Your presentation changed minds," he explained. "Several members approached me afterward, expressing confidence in your vision for Evergreen. They're tired of the constant financial tightrope walking." After hanging up, I sat quietly at my desk, absorbing the magnitude of what had just happened. 5 years ago, I had been a devastated divorcee with dwindling savings and a shattered sense of self-worth. Now I controlled a significant stake in one of the industry's leading environmental technology companies, the very company my ex-husband had prioritized over our marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me, but the victory felt different than I had imagined. There was satisfaction, certainly, but not the vindictive pleasure I might once have anticipated. Instead, I felt a weighty responsibility to the employees whose livelihoods now partially depended on my decisions, to the investors who had trusted my vision, and yes, even to Daniel, whose life's work I now held influence over. The official announcement went out the next morning. Phoenix Ventures acquires 28% stake in Evergreen Solutions, becomes largest shareholder. Within hours, my phone was flooded with messages from industry colleagues, journalists seeking comments, and friends offering congratulations. Lily called between classes, her voice excited. "Mom, I just saw the news online. You own Dad's company now?" "Not exactly, sweetheart," I clarified. "Phoenix and our partners are the largest shareholders, but we don't own the entire company. Your dad is still the CEO." "But you're his boss now, right?" she pressed, the complexity of corporate governance lost on her 14-year-old mind. I chose my words carefully. It's more complicated than that. The board oversees the CEO, and as major shareholders, we have influence on the board. But this isn't about who's the boss. It's about making Evergreen a stronger company. There was a pause before she asked, "Is Dad upset?" The question was loaded with concern. Despite our differences, I never wanted Lily to feel caught between her parents' professional rivalry. "Your dad and I have different ideas about running the business," I explained. "But we both want what's best for Evergreen, and more importantly, we both want what's best for you." After promising to explain more when she came for the weekend, I ended the call and turned my attention to the next critical step, my first board meeting as Evergreen's largest shareholder. It was scheduled for the following Monday, and I knew It would set the tone for everything that followed. Over the weekend, I prepared meticulously, reviewing Evergreen's operations in even greater detail and refining my proposals for the changes I believed were necessary. Lily helped me rehearse my presentation, playing the role of skeptical board member with surprising effectiveness. "You sound like Dad when you do that," I laughed after one particularly pointed question. She grinned. "I've been to his office. A lot. The way he talks to people there is different than at home." The observation was innocent, but revealing. Lily had been watching both her parents navigate their professional worlds, absorbing lessons from each of us. I wondered what she was learning from this latest chapter in our complicated story. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of rain and nervous energy. I arrived at Evergreen's headquarters 30 minutes early, giving myself time to center my thoughts before the meeting. To my surprise, Daniel was already in the boardroom, reviewing documents alone. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "Rebecca," he said, early as always. "Some habits don't change." "Some don't," I replied, setting my briefcase on the table. An awkward silence followed, thick with unspoken history. Finally, Daniel spoke. "I suppose congratulations are in order. You've accomplished something remarkable." The acknowledgement seemed genuine, lacking the bitterness I had anticipated. "Thank you," I said simply. He shuffled his papers, not meeting my eyes. "I've been thinking about what you said at the emergency meeting, about Evergreen's financial position. You weren't entirely wrong." Coming from Daniel, this was tantamount to a full concession. I waited, sensing he had more to say. "The last few acquisitions," he continued, "haven't performed as projected. We're carrying more debt than is comfortable. The board has been pressing for changes, even before your involvement." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. He finally looked up, his expression a mix of resignation and determination. "Because, despite what you might think, I care about this company. I built it from nothing. I don't want to see it torn apart in a power struggle." "That's not my intention," I assured him. "Then what is? Beyond the financial returns and strategic restructuring, what do you really want here, Rebecca?" It was a fair question, one I had been asking myself with increasing frequency. What did I want? Validation? Revenge? Or something more constructive? "I want to prove that there's a better way," I said finally. "Not just to you, but to the industry. Growth doesn't have to come at the expense of sustainability. Innovation doesn't require reckless risk-taking. I believe Evergreen can be more successful by being more responsible." Daniel considered this, drumming his fingers on the table. "And my role in this vision of yours?" "That depends on you," I replied honestly. "If you're willing to adapt, to consider different approaches, there's no reason we can't work together professionally. If not..." I left the alternative unspoken. Before he could respond, other board members began arriving, and our private conversation ended. The meeting proceeded with the formality typical of corporate governance. I was officially welcomed as a representative of Evergreen's largest shareholder. 2 of my colleagues from Phoenix were appointed to the board, shifting the balance of power subtly but significantly. When the time came to present my proposals for Evergreen's restructuring, I felt all eyes on me, especially Daniel's. I outlined a 3-phase plan. First, a comprehensive review of recent acquisitions to identify synergies and redundancies. Second, a renegotiation of the company's debt structure to improve terms and reduce immediate pressure. And third, a renewed focus on the company's core technologies, with increased R&D investment in areas showing the most promise. The goal, I explained, is not to dismantle what's been built, but to strengthen it. Evergreen has acquired incredible talent and technology. Now it needs the financial stability and strategic focus to leverage those assets effectively. To my surprise, Daniel didn't object to any of my proposals. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions about implementation timelines and resource allocation. The rest of the board engaged similarly, and by the end of the meeting, there was unanimous approval for moving forward with Phase 1 of the plan. As the meeting concluded, Robert Wilson, who remained board chair, pulled me aside. "I've been on many boards through many transitions," he said. "This could have been a bloodbath. Instead, you've managed to create alignment around a shared vision. That's rare and valuable." "It's early days," I cautioned. "The real test will come when we start making difficult decisions about redundancies and strategic pivots." "True," he acknowledged, "but you've set the right tone. Even Daniel seems cautiously on board, which honestly I didn't expect." Later that afternoon, as I prepared to leave Evergreen's offices, I ran into Sarah near the elevator. I had successfully avoided any one-on-one interaction with her until now, and the encounter was as awkward as I had anticipated. "Congratulations on the acquisition," she said stiffly. "It's quite an achievement." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There was no point in antagonizing her. Whatever had happened between her and Daniel was separate from my professional objectives now. She hesitated, then added, "Daniel's been different since the emergency board meeting. More reflective, less resistant to feedback. I think your presence has actually been good for him, professionally speaking." The admission clearly cost her something, and I appreciated the maturity it represented. "Change is rarely comfortable," I offered, "but sometimes it's necessary." "Yes," she agreed quietly. "Sometimes it is." The elevator arrived and we rode down in companionable silence. As we parted in the lobby, Sarah turned back. "Lily is a remarkable young woman," she said. "You've done an incredible job with her." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "She's the best of both of us, I think." Driving home that evening, I reflected on how differently the day had unfolded, compared to my expectations. I had prepared for resistance, for conflict, for a power struggle with Daniel that would require all my strategic skills to navigate. Instead, there had been a surprising level of acceptance, even collaboration. Was it possible that Daniel had genuinely recognized the wisdom in my approach? Or was he simply being pragmatic, adapting to a situation he couldn't control? Either way, the outcome was promising for Evergreen's future. Over the following months, our restructuring plan gained momentum. The comprehensive review of Evergreen's acquisitions revealed both problems and opportunities. Some units were underperforming due to insufficient resources or misalignment with Evergreen's core business. Others showed incredible potential, but had been hampered by aggressive revenue targets that prioritized short-term growth over sustainable development. 6 months after Phoenix Ventures acquired its stake in Evergreen Solutions, I stood at the podium in the company's largest conference room, addressing employees about our quarterly results. The transformation had been more successful than even our most optimistic projections. Profitability had increased by 34%, debt had been reduced by over $35 million, and employee retention had improved dramatically. "Today marks not just the end of a successful quarter," I told the assembled staff, "but the beginning of Evergreen's next chapter. You've all been part of an incredible turnaround story, and the market has noticed." Evergreen's private valuation had risen steadily over the past months, reflecting growing confidence in our restructuring strategy. The board had unanimously approved our Phase 3 initiatives, focusing on innovation and strategic growth in our core business areas. "None of this would have been possible without your dedication and resilience," I continued, making eye contact with team members throughout the room. "Change is never easy, but you've embraced it with professionalism and creativity." From the corner of my eye, I could see Daniel standing to the side, watching attentively. Our working relationship had evolved into something neither of us could have predicted. After initially accepting the changes with reluctance, he had gradually become an advocate for our new direction, leveraging his deep knowledge of the company to help implement our strategies effectively. As I concluded my remarks and stepped away from the podium, Daniel took my place to discuss specific departmental achievements. The transition was smooth, our leadership styles different but complementary. The employees, once anxious about the power dynamics between us, had grown accustomed to our professional partnership. Later that afternoon, the board convened for its quarterly meeting. The agenda included standard updates on operations and finances, but also a significant proposal: the creation of a new division called Evergreen Innovations that would operate somewhat independently from Evergreen's main business units. Evergreen Innovations would be funded initially with $25 million from our improved cash reserves, I explained, outlining the concept. It would focus on emerging environmental technologies that might not deliver immediate revenue, but have significant, long-term potential, essentially an internal incubator. We've identified several promising projects already in development within our existing teams that would benefit from this structure, Daniel added, supporting the proposal. Projects that have been constrained by our previous metrics-driven approach. Robert Wilson, still serving as board chair, looked pleased by our united front. The fact that you two are bringing this forward together gives me confidence, he said. It combines Rebecca's focus on sustainable growth with Daniel's strength in identifying breakthrough innovations. The proposal passed unanimously, and as the meeting adjourned, several board members commented on how effectively Daniel and I had managed to set aside our history for the benefit of the company. What they didn't fully understand was that our collaboration wasn't just professional pragmatism, it was a genuine evolution in how we related to each other. Dinner to celebrate the Innovation Fund approval? Daniel suggested as we gathered our materials. Lily is at a debate tournament tonight, so my evening is free. These occasional business dinners had become part of our new normal, professional, yet tinged with the familiarity that came from our shared history. I hesitated only briefly before agreeing. Sure. The usual place? We had found a small restaurant equidistant from both our homes, neutral territory where we could discuss evergreen business without the formality of the office or the complicated emotions of more personal settings. Over dinner, our conversation drifted from Evergreen's future to Lily's upcoming college visits. At 15, she was already thinking about potential majors and universities, showing an interest in both environmental science and business. She's got your analytical mind, Daniel observed, a note of pride in his voice. And your determination. Last week, she spent 4 hours on a debate preparation, refining her arguments until they were airtight. I smiled, recognizing the trait. She gets that from both of us, I think. For better or worse, Daniel nodded, his expression turning reflective. Mostly for better, though. I'm trying to teach her about balance, too. Something I never mastered myself. The comment hovered between us, laden with unspoken acknowledgments about the failures of our marriage. We had gradually become more comfortable referencing the past, though always carefully, always with an awareness of the boundaries we needed to maintain. I've been thinking, Daniel said after a pause, redirecting the conversation to safer territory. We should consider bringing some of the talent from our Boston acquisition into the new innovation division. Their team has a different approach to problem solving that could be valuable. I had the same thought, I agreed, especially Dr. Patel's group. Their work on carbon capture could apply across multiple projects. We spent the next hour discussing potential structures for Evergreen Innovations, building on each other's ideas with a synchronicity that had once characterized our early relationship. It was strange how easily we could collaborate professionally, despite everything that had happened between us personally. As we waited for dessert, Daniel's expression grew serious. There's something I need to discuss with you, outside of our Evergreen work. I tensed slightly, uncertain of what might follow. What is it? I've been offered a position at Horizon Ventures, he said, as their managing director for environmental technologies. The news caught me by surprise. Horizon was a prestigious venture capital firm specializing in early-stage clean tech innovations, exactly the kind of work Daniel excelled at. That's significant, I managed, processing the implications. Are you considering it seriously? He nodded. Very seriously. It would mean stepping down as Evergreen CEO, though I could potentially remain on the board in a reduced capacity. When would this happen? I asked, my mind already racing through the potential impact on Evergreen, on our working relationship, on Lily. They want an answer within 2 weeks, with a start date 3 months after that. Enough time for a proper transition at Evergreen. I took a moment to gather my thoughts. Daniel leaving Evergreen would fundamentally alter the dynamic we had established over the past months. In many ways, our professional collaboration had helped heal some of the wounds from our personal history. What would happen to that progress if he left? It's an incredible opportunity, I said finally. The kind that doesn't come along often. But, he prompted, sensing my hesitation. But Evergreen is stable now, yet flourishing. The restructuring is working, but we're still in a critical phase. Your institutional knowledge is valuable. Daniel studied me carefully. Are those your only concerns? Professional ones? The question pushed into territory we typically avoided. I considered deflecting, but opted for honesty instead. No, I admitted. I'm also thinking about what this means for how we manage co-parenting Lily. And yes, about what it means for the working relationship we've built. He nodded, seemingly appreciative of my candor. I've been thinking about those things too. That's partly why I wanted to discuss this with you before making a decision. Despite our history, your opinion matters to me. The acknowledgement meant more than I wanted to admit. After years of feeling dismissed and undervalued by Daniel, having him explicitly seek my input represented a profound shift. I think you should take it, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Evergreen will manage the transition. We'll find a new CEO who aligns with our vision. And as for the rest, we'll figure it out. We always do, for Lily's sake. Relief flickered across his face. Thank you. Your support means a lot. As we finished dinner and parted ways outside the restaurant, I found myself reflecting on how dramatically our lives had changed. 2 years ago, I had acquired a stake in Evergreen partly to prove that Daniel had been wrong about me. Now I was encouraging him to pursue a new opportunity, confident in my ability to continue Evergreen's transformation without him. The next morning, I called an early meeting with Marcus and Aiden to discuss succession planning. Daniel hadn't made his decision official yet, but I wanted to be prepared. If Daniel leaves, we have several options, Marcus observed after I explained the situation. We could promote from within. Samantha Wong in operations is highly respected and understands our new direction. Or we could bring in someone external, who might add fresh perspective. There's also the possibility of a co-CEO structure, Aiden suggested. It's becoming more common in tech, especially during transitions. I considered both ideas. Let's develop a short list for each scenario, and let's keep this confidential until Daniel makes his decision official. Over the following days, I found myself increasingly convinced that Daniel's departure, while challenging in the short term, might ultimately be positive for Evergreen. He would thrive in a role focused on innovation and early-stage investments, free from the operational responsibilities that had never been his strength. And Evergreen would benefit from leadership fully aligned with our sustainable growth strategy. When Daniel called to tell me he had accepted Horizon's offer, I was genuinely happy for him. Congratulations, I said warmly. It's the perfect role for you. Thanks, he replied, sounding both excited and nervous. I've already spoken with Robert about transition planning. He suggested you might step into an executive chair role temporarily while we search for a new CEO. The suggestion took me by surprise. Me? But I have Phoenix to run. The board trusts you, Daniel said simply. You understand Evergreen's operations now, and you've been the architect of our new strategy. It would just be for a few months, while we find the right permanent replacement. I promised to consider it, though the idea of taking a more direct role at Evergreen was unexpected. My goal had always been to influence the company's direction through Phoenix's position as majority shareholder, not to run it myself. That evening, as I helped Lily with her science project, a complex model of water purification systems, she asked about Daniel's new job. Dad told me he's leaving Evergreen, she said carefully, connecting filter components to a small pump. Will that be weird for you since you're both there now? Sometimes I forgot how perceptive she was, how attentive to the complex dynamics between her parents. It's actually a really good opportunity for your dad, I explained. And Evergreen will be fine. We've built a strong team. She nodded, focused on adjusting a miniature filtration membrane. He said you might become the boss there for a while. That would be kind of ironic, right? Since he used to say you should just stay home. The observation, delivered with teenage bluntness, made me pause. Your dad and I have both changed a lot since then, Lily. We've learned from our mistakes. I know, she said, looking up with a smile that reminded me so much of her younger self. That's what makes it cool, not sad. Like, both of you figured out how to be better. Her simple wisdom struck me deeply. In Lily's eyes, the story of her parents wasn't just about past hurts or power dynamics. It was about growth and learning. Perhaps there was something profound in that perspective. The following week, after careful consideration and discussions with Phoenix's leadership team, I agreed to serve as Evergreen's interim executive chair for 6 months while we conducted a thorough CEO search. The arrangement would require careful balancing of my responsibilities, but with Jessica stepping up to handle more of Phoenix's day-to-day operations, it seemed manageable. Daniel's announcement to the Evergreen staff was met with mixed reactions. Concern about his departure balanced by his evident enthusiasm for his new role and reassurances about continuity under my temporary leadership. We presented a united front, emphasizing that the transition was planned and positive. As we wrapped up the all-hands meeting, Daniel pulled me aside briefly. You know, when you first acquired Richard's stake in Evergreen, I was terrified you were going to dismantle everything I'd built. That was never the plan, I reminded him. I know that now, he acknowledged. But what I've realized over the past months is that sometimes things need to be partially dismantled to be rebuilt. Better. Evergreen is stronger now than it ever was under my sole leadership. That's a hard truth to accept, but an important one. His humility surprised me. The Daniel I had been married to would never have admitted such a thing. It wasn't just me, I said. It was the team we built together, the strategy we refined through collaboration. That's something neither of us could have done alone. He nodded thoughtfully. Maybe that's the real lesson here. Not that you were right and I was wrong, or that I underestimated you, though I certainly did. But that we're both better as leaders when we're open to different perspectives. As he walked away to speak with other team members, I considered his words. The journey that had brought me to this moment, from dismissed housewife to investment firm founder to executive chair of Evergreen Solutions, had never really been about proving Daniel wrong. It had been about discovering what I was capable of when freed from other people's limited perceptions. And in an unexpected way, Daniel's journey had paralleled mine. He had evolved from the dismissive husband who couldn't see my value beyond traditional roles to a colleague who respected my business acumen and leadership. We had both been transformed by the very conflict that once divided us. Later that day, as I settled into what would temporarily be my office at Evergreen, I found a small package on the desk with a note from Daniel. For the new chapter, the note read. Inside was a beautiful fountain pen and a journal bound in soft leather. The first page of the journal contained a handwritten message. Rebecca, Evergreen's story has many chapters left to write. Some of the most important ones will be authored by you. Thank you for seeing the potential in this company when I had lost my way, and for finding a path forward that honors what's best about what we built, while courageously changing what needed to change. The woman I once dismissed as just a housewife has become the leader Evergreen needs. I'm grateful our story took this unexpected turn. Daniel. I ran my fingers over the words, feeling the impression of the pen on the paper. There was no romance in his message, no hint of rekindling what had been lost. Instead, there was something perhaps more valuable, genuine respect and acknowledgement. Setting the journal aside, I turned to my computer and opened the strategic plan we had developed for Evergreen's next phase. There was still so much work to do, so many opportunities to pursue. The company that had once been the catalyst for my divorce had become the unexpected vehicle for my professional fulfillment and personal growth. Life's ironies, I was learning, often contained its deepest lessons. The journey that had begun with pain and dismissal had led to empowerment and new beginnings, not just for me, but for everyone involved. And that was a story worth telling, a legacy worth building, and a future worth embracing. The transition to my role as Evergreen's interim executive chair was smoother than I had anticipated. The groundwork we had laid over the previous 6 months, the improved financial performance, the clear strategic direction, the collaborative culture we'd begun to foster, provided a solid foundation. Still, there were challenges. Some members of the executive team who had been loyal to Daniel were wary of my more permanent presence. A few mid-level managers seemed to be waiting to see if this was truly a temporary arrangement before fully committing to our new initiatives. And externally, competitors were watching closely, some hoping that leadership changes might create opportunities to poach key talent or clients. I addressed these concerns head-on, meeting individually with each executive and departmental leader during my first 2 weeks. My message was consistent. This was a planned transition, not a coup. The strategy we had developed together was still our North Star. And yes, my role was temporary. We were actively searching for the right permanent CEO to lead Evergreen into its next phase. Most responded positively to this transparency. Those who didn't soon found that I wasn't easily intimidated by passive resistance. By the end of the first month, even the skeptics were grudgingly acknowledging that the company continued to function smoothly under my leadership. Meanwhile, the search for a permanent CEO was progressing well. We had engaged a top executive, recruitment firm with experience in the environmental technology sector. Their initial list of candidates was promising, a diverse group of seasoned executives with the right mix of operational experience and innovation mindset. One name on the list particularly caught my attention: Meera Patel, the current COO of a major renewable energy company. I had crossed paths with her at industry events and had always been impressed by her strategic thinking and leadership presence. She had a reputation for building collaborative teams and scaling organizations without losing their innovative edge, exactly what Evergreen needed. When I mentioned Meera to Robert Wilson, he immediately recognized the potential fit. "She's been on our radar before," he admitted. "We tried to recruit her about 3 years ago, but Daniel was convinced we needed someone with a more aggressive growth background. The timing might be better now." The board agreed to prioritize Meera in our search process, and I reached out to her personally to gauge her interest. To my delight, she was immediately intrigued by Evergreen's transformation story. "I've been following your company's turnaround with interest," she said during our first phone call. "The shift toward sustainable growth while doubling down on innovation is exactly the approach I've been advocating in my current role. I'd love to learn more." We arranged for her to visit Portland for preliminary discussions, keeping the meetings discreet to respect her current position. When she arrived, at Evergreen's headquarters, I gave her a comprehensive tour, introducing her to key team members and explaining our strategic vision in detail. "What impressed me most," Meera told me over lunch afterward, is how you've managed to shift the culture in such a short time. Companies this size usually take years to change direction. It wasn't easy, I acknowledged, and it's still a work in progress. But we had two advantages: a core of talented people who were hungry for a more sustainable approach, and a crisis severe enough to create urgency around change. She nodded thoughtfully. And an owner with both the vision and the courage to implement it. I wasn't alone, I said, thinking of Daniel's eventual support and the board's willingness to take risks. The best transformations never are. Speaking of not being alone, Mira said, tell me about your relationship with the founder. It's unusual to see an ex-spouse take over a company and then recruit a successor rather than staying in power. Most people in your position would either sell their stake once they've proven their point or entrench themselves in leadership. The question was direct but not hostile, a legitimate concern from someone considering taking the helm of a company with our complex history. Daniel and I both recognized that our personal history could become a liability for Evergreen if handled poorly, I explained. But we also found that our different perspectives, when combined constructively, created better outcomes than either of us could achieve alone. He's moved on to a role that better suits his talents, and I'm committed to finding the right permanent leadership for Evergreen because my primary responsibility is to Phoenix Ventures. And if I were to become CEO, Mira asked, how would that dynamic work? Would you remain as board chair? I would step back to my role as representative of the largest shareholder, I assured her. You would have full operational authority, as CEO, reporting to the board as a whole, not to me specifically. My interest is in Evergreen's success, not in controlling its day-to-day operations. My candor seemed to resonate with her. By the end of her visit, Mira was openly enthusiastic about the possibility of joining Evergreen. The board was equally impressed with her, and within 3 weeks, we had extended a formal offer which she accepted after brief negotiations. The announcement of Mira's appointment was met with widespread approval both internally and in the industry press. Evergreen completes transformation with strategic CEO hire, read one headline. Phoenix's Taylor successfully navigates unusual corporate transition, noted another. Daniel called to congratulate me on the hire. I've heard great things about Mira, he said. She seems like the perfect choice to take Evergreen forward. She is, I agreed. How's Horizon treating you? It's exhilarating, he admitted. A genuine excitement in his voice I hadn't heard in years. Being back in the early-stage investment world, working with founders who are solving real environmental problems, it feels right in a way that running Evergreen hadn't for a long time. I'm glad, I said, and meant it. You sound happier. I am, he replied. And I owe some of that to you, Rebecca. If you hadn't forced me to confront Evergreen's problems, I might still be there, growing more frustrated and making increasingly risky decisions to maintain the growth trajectory. The acknowledgement was unexpected but welcome. We both ended up where we needed to be, I said. Just not by the path either of us would have chosen. Life rarely follows our planned route, he observed. Speaking of which, Lily mentioned you're dating someone? An architect, I think she said. The question caught me off guard. We rarely discussed our personal lives beyond co-parenting matters. Yes, Thomas. We've been seeing each other for a few months. It's still new. Good, Daniel said, with what sounded like genuine warmth. You deserve happiness, Rebecca. In all parts of your life, not just professionally. After we hung up, I sat at my desk reflecting on how far we had both come from that devastating anniversary dinner when he had handed me divorce papers. The hurt and betrayal that had once defined our relationship had gradually transformed into something I never would have thought possible. A respectful co-parenting partnership and a productive professional connection. The day Mira Patel officially took over as Evergreen CEO was bittersweet for me. I had grown attached to the company and its people during my tenure as executive chair. But I was also eager to refocus on Phoenix Ventures, which had continued to thrive under Jessica's capable interim leadership but would benefit from my full attention again. We marked the occasion with a small ceremony in Evergreen's main conference room. I formally introduced Mira to the assembled staff, highlighting her impressive background and expressing full confidence in her ability to lead Evergreen into its next growth phase. The transformation we began together isn't ending today, I told the employees. It's entering a new chapter with a leader uniquely qualified to build on the foundation we've established. Under Mira's guidance, Evergreen will continue its evolution into the company we all know it can be: innovative, sustainable, and industry-leading. After the ceremony, as staff members lined up to welcome Mira, I felt a quiet sense of completion. The company was in good hands. The restructuring had succeeded beyond our initial projections. And personally, I had proven, to myself most of all, that I was capable of far more than Daniel had once believed. As I prepared to leave what had been my office for the past 4 months, Mira stopped by. "I wanted to thank you," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Not just for this opportunity, but for the way you've set me up for success. Most departing executives don't leave things in such good order." I smiled, packing the last of my personal items into a small box. "I have a vested interest in your success, both as a major shareholder and because I care about this company and its people." "Will I still see you at board meetings?" she asked. "Of course. I'll remain on the board, though I'll be stepping back from the chair role. Robert Wilson will resume those duties." She nodded, then hesitated before asking, "Can I seek your counsel occasionally, outside of formal board interactions? Your insights into Evergreen's history and culture would be valuable as I navigate my first few months." "I'd be honored," I replied, touched by her request, "though I suspect you'll find your own way quite quickly." As I drove away from Evergreen's headquarters that afternoon, I felt a profound sense of closure. The company that had once represented my greatest professional humiliation, the venture Daniel had prioritized over our marriage and my career, had become the vehicle for my most significant professional validation. But more importantly, the journey had transformed me. The woman who had once internalized Daniel's dismissive label of just a housewife was gone. In her place stood someone who knew her worth, who had proven her capabilities, and who now understood that validation from others, even from those who once hurt us, is far less important than believing in oneself. Back at Phoenix Ventures, I was greeted with a small welcome back celebration organized by Jessica and the team. The office was decorated with balloons, and a banner reading "The Queen Returns" hung above my office door. "We might have gone a little overboard," Jessica admitted with a grin, "but we wanted to make sure you knew how much we missed you. And how relieved we are that you'll be focusing on Phoenix full-time again," Marcus added. "We have some exciting new opportunities to discuss when you're ready." Looking around at the team I had built, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude. These people had believed in my vision when few others did. They had helped transform Phoenix from a desperate act of self-reinvention into a respected investment firm with a solid track record of success. "It's good to be home," I told them. "Now tell me everything I've missed." The transition back to full-time leadership at Phoenix was seamless. Jessica had done an excellent job maintaining our investment strategy and client relationships during my partial absence. Several new opportunities had emerged, including a promising water conservation technology that aligned perfectly with our focus on sustainable innovations. My experience at Evergreen had also given me valuable insights that I could now apply at Phoenix. I better understood the challenges of implementing major organizational changes, the importance of aligning incentives throughout a company, and the delicate balance between innovation and operational discipline. These lessons proved immediately useful as Phoenix entered its next growth phase. We expanded our team, adding expertise in areas like agricultural technology and sustainable transportation. We launched a second fund focused specifically on later-stage investments, allowing us to continue supporting promising companies beyond their initial growth stages. And personally, my relationship with Thomas was deepening. He was thoughtful, supportive, and genuinely interested in my work without being intimidated by my success. A refreshing change from what I had experienced with Daniel in the later years of our marriage. "You're different when you talk about Phoenix," Thomas observed. One evening, as we walked along the waterfront after dinner, "Your whole energy changes. You light up from within." "It's the first thing I built entirely on my own terms," I explained. "Evergreen was important to me, but it was always tied to my history with Daniel. Phoenix is just mine." He smiled, taking my hand. "Not just yours anymore. You've created something that's become important to your whole team, to your investors, and to all the companies you support. That's the mark of a true leader, building something that transcends you." His observation struck me as profoundly true. Phoenix had indeed grown beyond my personal redemption story into an organization with its own identity and impact. That evolution gave me a different kind of satisfaction than the vindication I had initially sought. 6 months after Mira took over as Evergreen's CEO, both companies were thriving. Evergreen had successfully launched several new product lines developed through the innovation division Daniel and I had established. Phoenix had completed a successful round of fundraising for our second fund, exceeding our target by nearly 30%. The business press had taken notice of both companies' success, and I was asked to give a keynote address at the Northwest Innovation Summit, the same conference where, years earlier, Daniel had publicly dismissed my business acumen. As I prepared my remarks for the conference, I reflected on the circuitous path that had led me to this moment. If Daniel hadn't underestimated me, if he hadn't chosen his company over our marriage, if he hadn't handed me those divorce papers on our anniversary, would I ever have discovered my own potential? Would Phoenix Ventures exist? Would Evergreen have evolved into the more sustainable, innovative company it had become? There was a certain poetic justice in returning to this conference as a keynote speaker, rather than as someone's supportive spouse. But I realized that my message needed to transcend personal vindication. The audience would include aspiring entrepreneurs, industry veterans, and investors looking for insights, not a personal redemption story. The day of the conference, I arrived early to familiarize myself with the venue. The main hall was already filling with attendees, a diverse group representing the region's vibrant innovation ecosystem. To my surprise, I spotted Daniel in the crowd, engaged in animated conversation with a young entrepreneur. He saw me and excused himself, making his way over. "I hope you don't mind that I came," he said. "When I saw you were the keynote speaker, I thought it would be appropriate to support you, given our history." The reference to our past was subtle but clear. We both remembered the last time we had attended this conference together, when he had so casually dismissed my contributions. "I appreciate that," I said sincerely. "How are things at Horizon?" "Excellent. We just closed our fund focused on climate adaptation technologies. You and I should talk afterward. There might be some co-investment opportunities that would interest Phoenix." "I'd like that," I replied, genuinely intrigued by the possibility of a professional collaboration that had nothing to do with our personal history. As I took the stage 30 minutes later, I saw Daniel take a seat in the middle of the audience. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. He wasn't hiding in the back, nor was he placing himself prominently in the front row. He was simply there, one industry colleague among many, ready to listen to what I had to say. My speech focused on the importance of sustainable growth strategies in the environmental technology sector, drawing on lessons from both Phoenix's investment approach and Evergreen's transformation. I spoke about the false dichotomy between profitability and responsibility, the untapped potential in overlooked founders and technologies, and the competitive advantages of long-term thinking in a short-term world. The audience responded enthusiastically, particularly to my candid discussion of mistakes I had made and lessons learned the hard way. During the Q&A session, a young woman asked a question that brought our narrative full circle. "You've spoken about building Phoenix Ventures from scratch. After a major life transition," she said, "many of us face setbacks or dismissal in our careers. What advice would you give to someone who's been underestimated or overlooked?" I considered the question carefully, aware of Daniel's presence in the audience. First, recognize that being underestimated can actually be an advantage. It gives you the opportunity to exceed expectations and surprise people. Second, use that dismissal as fuel, but don't let it define you or your goals. The best revenge isn't proving others wrong. It's building something so meaningful that their opinion becomes irrelevant. I paused, then added, "And finally, be open to the possibility that people can change, including those who once underestimated you." Some of my most productive professional relationships today are with people who initially dismissed my potential. Their recognition of their mistake allowed us both to grow. As I said those words, I glanced briefly at Daniel. He met my gaze with a small nod of acknowledgement, a silent confirmation of our shared journey from adversaries to allies. After the keynote, as attendees gathered for the networking reception, Daniel approached me again, this time with Lily beside him. She had apparently come directly from school to surprise me. "Mom, you were amazing," she exclaimed, giving me a fierce hug. Everyone was so impressed. This guy behind me kept saying, "She really knows her stuff," to his colleague. I laughed, delighted by her enthusiasm and unexpected presence. "Thank you, sweetheart. But shouldn't you be at debate practice?" "Dad got me excused," she explained, glancing at Daniel with obvious affection. "He said some things are more important than practice, like watching your mom show an entire industry what she's capable of." Daniel smiled, slightly embarrassed by her candor. I might have phrased it less dramatically, but that was the general idea. In that moment, witnessing the pride in both their faces, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't anticipated. The story that had begun with such pain and humiliation, an anniversary dinner turned to ashes by divorce papers, had evolved through many chapters: desperation, determination, vindication, collaboration, and now, something approaching harmony. The woman who had once been so casually dismissed as just a housewife now stood as a respected industry leader. The company that had been the catalyst for my divorce had become an unexpected vehicle for redemption, not just for me, but for Daniel as well. And our daughter, rather than being damaged by our conflict, had witnessed a powerful lesson in resilience, growth, and the capacity for people to change. Later that evening, as Thomas and I celebrated the successful keynote over dinner, he raised his glass in a toast to new beginnings that we never could have imagined. I clinked my glass against his, thinking about the unpredictable path that had brought me here, to a life more fulfilling than the one I had once desperately tried to save. Sometimes, I reflected, the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one. "Even when that ending comes in the form of divorce papers on your anniversary?" he asked gently. I smiled, thinking of the liquidation notice I had signed in response. Not out of vengeance, but as the first step toward reclaiming my power and purpose. "Especially then," I replied. "Because sometimes we need to be released from what was before we can discover what could be." The view from Evergreen's new headquarters was spectacular. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Portland skyline, the Willamette River winding through the urban landscape like a silver ribbon. I stood at the glass watching the sunset paint the buildings in shades of gold and pink, a moment of quiet, reflection before the evening's festivities began. "Mom, they're ready for us downstairs." Lily's voice pulled me from my thoughts. At 16, she was a striking young woman, poised and confident in her formal dress. She'd come home from her debate tournament specifically for this event, the 5-year anniversary of Evergreen's restructuring and the official opening of our new innovation campus. "You look beautiful," I said, smiling at my daughter. "You, too," she replied, then added with a grin, "Ready to face the cameras?" I rolled my eyes good-naturedly. "As ready as I'll ever be." Dad just texted. His meeting ran long, but he's on his way. "Perfect timing," I replied, gathering my notes for the evening speech. The journey to this moment had been remarkable. After my 6-month tenure as Evergreen's interim executive chair, Meera Patel had taken the helm as CEO, exceeding all our expectations. Under her leadership, Evergreen had risen to become the industry leader in environmental technology, with a corporate culture that balanced innovation with responsibility. Meanwhile, Phoenix Ventures had continued its impressive growth trajectory. We had expanded to 3 investment funds, increased our team to 35 professionals, and maintained our reputation for identifying promising technologies that others overlooked. The sustainable investment approach I had pioneered, once dismissed by Daniel as naive, was now being emulated by larger firms throughout the industry. Daniel had thrived in his role at Horizon Ventures, leveraging his talent for identifying breakthrough technologies and supporting visionary founders. He remained on Evergreen's board, his institutional knowledge and external perspective proving valuable during quarterly meetings. Our professional relationship had settled into something neither of us could have predicted. A genuine collaboration built on mutual respect and shared goals. The bitterness of our divorce had gradually faded, replaced by a functional partnership, focused primarily on Lily's well-being and secondarily on our overlapping professional interests. "There's Dad," Lily said as we entered the reception area. Daniel was just arriving, engaged in animated conversation with Victor Reynolds, who had remained one of our key investment partners throughout Evergreen's transformation. Daniel looked up and waved, excusing himself to join us. "Sorry about cutting it close," he said, straightening his tie. "The Boston Investment Committee meeting ran long." "You're just in time," I assured him. "The ceremony doesn't start for another 15 minutes." As we made our way to the event space, I marveled at how comfortably we moved as a unit. Not a family in the traditional sense anymore, but bound by something just as meaningful: shared history, mutual respect, and genuine goodwill. The celebration was a testament to how far Evergreen had come. Over 400 people had gathered: employees, investors, industry partners, and media. Under Meera's leadership, and with our continued strategic guidance, Evergreen had evolved into a model of sustainable growth in the environmental technology sector. Profitability had increased year over year, employee satisfaction scores ranked among the highest in the industry, and our innovation division had spun off 4 successful ventures already. As I took the podium to deliver my remarks as board member and representative of Phoenix Ventures, I looked out at the assembled crowd, spotting many familiar faces. Jessica sat near the front, having become one of my closest friends and advisors. Marcus was chatting with several team members. Sarah had moved on years ago, accepting a position with a marketing firm in Seattle, but we had maintained cordial relations during professional crossovers. 5 years ago, I began, Evergreen Solutions stood at a crossroads. The company had achieved remarkable growth, but faced significant challenges. Today, we celebrate not just survival, but transformation. Evergreen is now a leader not only in technological innovation, but in corporate responsibility, sustainable growth, and inclusive leadership. I acknowledged the contributions of everyone who had been part of the journey: the employees who had embraced change, the investors who had maintained faith in our vision, and the leadership team that had executed that vision with skill and determination. Special recognition must go to Daniel Taylor, Evergreen's founder, I continued, nodding toward where he sat beside Lily. His original vision created the foundation upon which we've built. And to Meera Patel, whose leadership, over the past 4 years, has taken Evergreen to new heights. Meera nodded appreciatively from her seat in the front row. Our professional relationship had evolved into a warm friendship, strengthened by mutual respect and a shared commitment to proving that business success and environmental responsibility could go hand in hand. The speech continued with updates on our latest innovations and future plans, but my focus kept returning to how this moment encapsulated my own journey, from dismissed housewife to respected business leader, from bitter ex-wife to collaborative colleague. The path had been unexpected, but ultimately rewarding in ways I couldn't have imagined when I first set out to prove myself. At the reception following the ceremony, I found myself standing beside Daniel at the refreshment table, both of us taking a brief moment away from the constant congratulations and conversations. "Remember when you first told me about Phoenix?" he asked, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. I was so dismissive, so certain I knew better. I smiled, remembering the dining room table covered with my research, his casual dismissal of my efforts. "You were quite confident in your assessment." "I was an idiot," he corrected, shaking his head. "But you know what's strange? In a roundabout way, my biggest mistake led to the best outcome for Evergreen. If I had listened to you then, supported your ideas, we might have made safer investments, achieved moderate success, but we wouldn't be here." He gestured to the innovation campus around us. "Life rarely follows a linear path," I agreed, "especially the important journeys." "Mom!" Lily appeared suddenly, excitement radiating from her. "Dr. Landry is here. From the Environmental Sciences Department at Reed College. Can I introduce you?" "Of course," I replied, pleased by her enthusiasm. As Lily led me across the room toward her professor, I glanced back at Daniel, who gave me an encouraging nod. The moment captured the essence of where we had all arrived, supporting each other's paths while maintaining our distinct identities and pursuits. Later that evening, after most guests had departed, I found myself back at the windows, gazing at the city now illuminated by countless lights. Evergreen's new headquarters stood as a physical manifestation of everything we had built. Not just a successful company, but a new way of approaching business and relationships. "Penny for your thoughts," Jessica's voice interrupted my reflection as she joined me at the window. "Just taking it all in," I replied. "Sometimes I still can't believe how everything unfolded." She smiled knowingly. "When you first pitched the Evergreen acquisition to me, I thought you were at least partially motivated by revenge. I wasn't wrong, was I?" I laughed softly. "No, you weren't wrong. Proving Daniel wrong was definitely part of it. But somewhere along the way, the motivation changed." "That's the difference between success and true fulfillment," she observed. "The former can come from external validation, but the latter requires something deeper." Her words resonated with the realization I had come to gradually over the years. The victory that had initially seemed most important, showing Daniel that I was more than just a housewife, had ultimately been just the beginning of a much more meaningful journey. The true achievement wasn't in proving him wrong, but in discovering who I could become when freed from the limitations others had placed on me, and eventually from the limitations I had placed on myself. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the decade that had transformed my life. The divorce that had once seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning. The desire for vindication that had initially fueled me had evolved into something far more sustaining: purpose, confidence, and genuine impact. And perhaps most surprisingly, the relationship that had been broken beyond repair had been forged into something new. Not a marriage, but a different kind of partnership built on hard-earned respect and shared values. The woman who had once been called just a housewife had become a business leader, an investor, a mentor, and a board member. But more importantly, she had become fully herself, defined not by her relationship to others but by her own choices, values, and vision. As I pulled into my driveway, I smiled at the thought of tomorrow's brunch with Thomas. Life continued to evolve, relationships continued to change, but the foundation I had built, both professionally and personally, was strong enough to support whatever came next. The journey hadn't been what I expected, but it had led exactly where I needed to go. 3 days after the Evergreen celebration, I was back in Phoenix's offices, reviewing a promising new investment opportunity in carbon capture technology. The excitement around Evergreen's anniversary had given way to the normal rhythm of business, analyzing potential investments, meeting with portfolio companies, and guiding our team's strategic direction. A knock at my door interrupted my concentration. Jessica stood in the doorway, an unusual expression on her face. "What is it?" I asked, immediately alert to her demeanor. "You have a visitor," she said. "Eleanor Wilson is here. She says it's important." I was surprised. While Eleanor and I maintained a cordial professional relationship, unscheduled visits weren't her style. As one of Phoenix's original investors and a respected figure in the financial world, she was typically meticulous about arranging meetings in advance. "Send her in," I said, quickly clearing space on my desk. Eleanor entered with her characteristic purposeful stride. At 68, she remained an imposing figure. Elegantly dressed, silver hair cut in a precise bob, her gaze direct and penetrating. "Rebecca," she said, accepting my offered handshake. "Thank you for seeing me without notice. I apologize for the interruption." "Not at all," I replied, gesturing toward the sitting area in my office. "This is a pleasant surprise. What brings you to Portland?" She settled into one of the armchairs, carefully placing her designer handbag beside her. "I've been following the coverage of Evergreen's anniversary. Impressive achievement. You should be proud." "Thank you. It's been a team effort." "Indeed." She studied me for a moment. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I'm retiring." The announcement caught me off guard. Eleanor Wilson retiring seemed almost inconceivable. She had been a fixture in the investment world for decades, breaking barriers and setting standards for women in finance. "That's significant news," I said carefully. "May I ask what prompted this decision?" A slight smile softened her usually stern expression. "Age, primarily. I'm approaching 70, Rebecca. I've built my firm, mentored my successors, and frankly, I'd like to spend more time with my grandchildren before they're completely grown. But retirement presents certain challenges." I waited, sensing there was more to this visit than a retirement announcement. "I need to liquidate my investment holdings," she continued, "including my stake in Phoenix Ventures." My stomach tightened. Eleanor held a 15% stake in Phoenix, our single largest outside investor. Her sudden withdrawal could create significant disruption. "I see," I managed, keeping my voice neutral. "We'd need to structure that carefully to avoid destabilizing the firm." "Precisely why I'm here in person," she agreed. "But there's another dimension to consider. I've received an offer for my entire investment portfolio, including my Phoenix stake." The situation was becoming clear. "Who made the offer?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "Summit Group," she confirmed. "Richard Donovan specifically." Richard Donovan, the same investor who had sold us his stake in Evergreen 5 years ago. The coincidence seemed too perfect to be accidental. "And you're considering it?" I kept my tone carefully neutral. Eleanor clasped her hands in her lap. "It's an excellent offer, above market value. But my relationship with Phoenix is not merely financial. You were my first major investment after I established my own firm. I've watched you build something remarkable from nothing. I wouldn't consider selling my stake without discussing it with you first." I appreciated her directness. "What's Richard's interest in Phoenix? We're successful, certainly, but we're not in Summit's usual investment profile." He didn't specify, Eleanor admitted. But I suspect it's not about Phoenix's fundamentals. It's about you. Me? You outmaneuvered him with Evergreen, she said bluntly. You transformed a company he had written off as overextended into an industry leader. Now Phoenix is expanding into areas that compete directly with Summit's core investments. Richard doesn't like losing, Rebecca. He particularly doesn't like losing to someone he once underestimated. The irony wasn't lost on me. 5 years ago, I had been fighting to prove myself against Daniel's dismissal. Now, having succeeded beyond my expectations, I was facing a new challenge from someone who had initially supported my rise. "What are you planning to do?" I asked. Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "I came to offer you right of first. Refusal. Match Summit's offer, and my shares are yours. You'd become the sole majority owner of Phoenix." The proposition was stunning. Buying Eleanor's stake would require significant capital, more than I could easily access without leveraging other assets. But the alternative, having Richard Donovan as a major shareholder in the company I had built from nothing, was deeply unsettling. "I'll need time to consider this," I said finally, "and to arrange financing if I decide to move forward." "You have 2 weeks," Eleanor replied, standing to leave. "I've told Richard I'm considering other options. After that, I'll need to make a decision." After she left, I sat at my desk processing this unexpected development. The symmetry was almost poetic. Once again facing a situation where someone was attempting to gain control over something I had built, using financial leverage rather than recognizing its true value. But there was a crucial difference this time. 5 years ago, I had been fighting from a position of weakness, struggling to prove my worth in a world that had dismissed me. Now I was negotiating from a position of established strength with resources, reputation, and relationships I had earned through years of demonstrating my capabilities. I spent the next 3 days analyzing my options. Buying Eleanor's stake would strain my financial resources, but would secure Phoenix's independence. Allowing Richard to become a major shareholder would bring unwanted interference, but might open doors to larger capital pools. There was also the possibility of finding another investor who shared our vision, though assembling that quickly would be challenging. On the 4th day, as I was reviewing potential financing structures with our CFO, Aidan, my assistant informed me that Daniel was calling. "Can it wait?" I asked, deep in spreadsheets. "He says it's important," she replied. "Something about Summit Group." I frowned, wondering how Daniel had heard about Richard's offer. "Put him through." "Rebecca," Daniel's voice came through the speakerphone. "Do you have a minute?" "I'm in the middle of something, but yes. What's up?" "I just got off the phone with Richard Donovan," he said without preamble. "He wanted to feel me out about rejoining Evergreen's board if he acquired a significant stake in Phoenix." My grip tightened on my pen. "What?" "He didn't say it directly, but he implied that with Phoenix's stake in Evergreen and his potential stake in Phoenix, he could create a voting bloc to reshape Evergreen's direction. He seemed to think I'd be interested in helping reverse some of the changes you implemented." The strategy was becoming clear. Richard wasn't just interested in Phoenix as an investment. He was planning to use it as leverage to influence Evergreen, potentially undoing years of successful restructuring. "What did you tell him?" I asked, though I wasn't particularly worried about Daniel's loyalties at this point in our relationship. "I told him he fundamentally misunderstood the situation," Daniel replied, a hint of indignation in his voice. "Evergreen is thriving precisely because of the changes you championed. Why would I want to reverse course on the most successful business transformation I've been part of?" Despite the serious situation, I couldn't help but smile at how far Daniel had come from the man who once dismissed my business acumen. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "This explains a lot about Richard's sudden interest in Phoenix." "What are you going to do?" Daniel asked. "I'm working on that. Eleanor gave me 2 weeks to match his offer if I want to buy her shares myself. There was a brief silence before Daniel spoke again. Would you be open to a different option? What kind of option? A partnership, he said. Horizon has been looking to diversify our investment approach. What if we offered to purchase half of Eleanor's stake? You'd take the other half. Neither of us would have to overextend financially, and you'd maintain controlling interest in Phoenix. The proposal caught me by surprise. You'd want to invest in Phoenix? It makes strategic sense, he explained. Phoenix has expertise in areas where Horizon is just beginning to develop a presence. We could create synergies without either firm losing its identity. And frankly, I'd rather partner with someone whose judgment I trust than see Richard gain influence over both our companies. The irony of Daniel offering to back my company, the very thing he had refused to do during our marriage, wasn't lost on either of us. But this wasn't about our past. It was about making a sound business decision in the present. Let me think about it, I said. It's an interesting proposition. After we hung up, I leaned back in my chair, considering this unexpected development. A partnership with Horizon would solve the immediate financial challenge while potentially creating new opportunities for both firms. The question was whether I could separate the professional advantages from the emotional complexity of once again linking my business future with Daniel's, even in this limited way. I decided to discuss the option with my most trusted advisor. That evening, over dinner at home, I explained the situation to Thomas. It's a decent proposal from a business perspective, he acknowledged after hearing the details. Horizon's reputation is solid, and their portfolio complements Phoenix's. The question is whether you're comfortable with the personal dynamics. I appreciated his insight. In the 2 years we'd been together, Thomas had shown a remarkable ability to understand the complexities of my relationship with Daniel without feeling threatened by our ongoing professional connection. 5 years ago, I would have rejected the idea outright, I admitted. It would have felt like giving Daniel power over something I built specifically to prove I didn't need him. But now, I trailed off, trying to articulate the shift in my perspective. Now it's just business, Thomas finished for me. You've already proven everything you needed to prove, to him and to yourself. Exactly, I said, grateful for his understanding. Phoenix isn't my redemption story anymore. It's a successful company making important investments in sustainable technologies. If partnering with Horizon advances that mission, maybe the history doesn't matter. Thomas reached across the table to take my hand. So, what are you going to do? I squeezed his hand, feeling a clarity I hadn't expected. I'm going to negotiate the best possible partnership agreement, one that protects Phoenix's independence while maximizing the strategic benefits of working with Horizon, and then I'm going to call Richard Donovan and thank him. Thank him? Thomas looked confused. I smiled. For reminding me that I've moved beyond needing to prove myself. 5 years ago, I fought to show I wasn't just a housewife. Now I'm secure enough to make decisions based on what's best for Phoenix, not what proves a point about my capabilities. The next morning, I called Daniel to discuss terms for a potential partnership. Our conversation was remarkably straightforward. 2. Experienced business leaders negotiating a mutually beneficial arrangement. We agreed on a basic framework. Horizon would purchase 5% of Phoenix. I would purchase the other 5% of Eleanor's stake, and we would create a limited strategic alliance focused on specific investment areas where our expertise complemented each other. With the framework established, I reached out to Eleanor to present our counteroffer. She seemed pleased by the solution. A creative approach, she observed, and one that keeps Phoenix firmly under your control while adding strategic capabilities. I'm impressed, though not surprised. This is why I came to you first. We scheduled a meeting for the following week to finalize the details. In the meantime, I contacted Richard Donovan directly, informing him that Eleanor had decided to accept an alternative offer for her Phoenix shares. His response was terse but revealing. "I underestimated your resourcefulness, Rebecca." Again. "That seems to be a pattern," I replied, keeping my tone professional. "Though I'm curious, was this really about Phoenix, or was it about using Phoenix to influence Evergreen?" There was a brief silence before he answered. "Let's just say I recognized an elegant solution to multiple objectives. No hard feelings. It's just business." "Of course," I agreed. "And for what it's worth, I appreciate the reminder that success attracts both allies and competitors. It's a useful lesson." After concluding the call, I reflected on how differently I had handled this challenge compared to 5 years ago. When Daniel had dismissed me, I had responded with determination tinged with anger and a desperate need to prove myself. When faced with Richard's maneuver, I had responded with confident strategy and professional alliances based on mutual respect. The contrast illustrated just how far I had come. 1 week later, the partnership agreement was finalized. The press release went out announcing that I had increased my ownership stake in Phoenix Ventures and established a strategic alliance with Horizon Ventures. The business media responded positively, noting the complementary expertise of the two firms and the potential for innovation in sustainable technology investments. To commemorate the new partnership and thank our teams for their hard work, Daniel and I hosted a joint reception at a rooftop venue overlooking Portland. As our employees mingled, getting to know their new colleagues, I found myself standing at the edge of the terrace, taking in the view of the city where I had rebuilt my life from the ground up. Daniel joined me, offering a glass of champagne. "To unexpected partnerships," he said, raising his glass in a toast. I clinked my glass against his. "And to learning from our mistakes." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You know, when I handed you those divorce papers at our anniversary dinner, I thought I was making a strategic business decision, cutting ties with someone who didn't understand my vision so I could pursue it unencumbered." "And now?" I prompted, curious about his perspective after all these years. "Now I realize it was the biggest strategic error of my career," he admitted with a rueful smile. "But also, strangely, the catalyst for the best outcomes for both of us. You built Phoenix, I found my place at Horizon, and Evergreen became stronger than either of us could have made it alone." Life's ironies, I mused. The things that hurt us most sometimes lead us exactly where we need to be. Our conversation was interrupted by Lily, who approached with a proud smile. "The Reed College team just arrived," she announced. "Dr. Landry wants to discuss the environmental scholarship program with both of you." As we followed our daughter across the terrace, I was struck by how this moment embodied everything I had fought for. Not just professional success or validation, but the chance to create something meaningful, to influence positive change, and to show Lily that setbacks can become foundations for new beginnings. The woman who had once stared in shock at divorce papers across an anniversary dinner table now moved confidently through a celebration of her own creation. The path from that devastating moment to this triumphant one had been neither straight nor easy, but every difficult step had strengthened me, teaching me not just about business strategy, but about my own capacity for resilience, growth, and reinvention. In the end, the liquidation notice I had given Daniel years ago hadn't just changed Evergreen's ownership. It had liquidated old limitations, outdated assumptions, and self-imposed boundaries. What remained after that dissolution was stronger, purer, and infinitely more valuable. A clear understanding of my worth that no one could ever again dismiss as just anything. As I joined Dr. Landry's conversation about expanding educational opportunities for young women interested in environmental sciences, I caught Thomas's eye across the room. He gave me a warm smile and a subtle thumbs up, his pride evident even from a distance. This too was part of my journey, finding a partner who celebrated my strength rather than feeling threatened by it, who saw my success as our shared joy rather than a competition. 5 years after I had signed those liquidation papers, I had built not just a successful business, but a fulfilling life. One defined by purpose rather than pain, by creation rather than revenge, and by a future oriented toward possibility rather than a past mired in resentment. The anniversary that had once marked the end of my marriage now marked the beginning of a new chapter, one written entirely on my own terms. As Eleanor Wilson sat across from me explaining her retirement plans and Richard Donovan's offer to buy her stake in Phoenix Ventures, I felt an unexpected sense of calm. 5 years ago, a threat to my company's autonomy would have triggered panic, defensiveness, and fear. Now I recognized it as simply another business challenge to navigate strategically. This evolution wasn't just about professional growth, it reflected a deeper personal transformation. The woman who had once desperately needed to prove her worth now knew it intrinsically. The validation I had once sought from others, especially Daniel, now came from within. After finalizing the partnership agreement with Horizon Ventures, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought me here. The path from that devastating anniversary dinner to this moment of triumph contained lessons too valuable to keep to myself. I began speaking at women's leadership conferences, sharing my story of reinvention and resilience, not the sanitized version where success came easily, but the messy, authentic reality, complete with moments of doubt, financial struggle, and the challenge of balancing single motherhood with entrepreneurship. The greatest gift my ex-husband inadvertently gave me, I told a packed auditorium of aspiring female entrepreneurs, was the opportunity to discover what I was truly capable of. When someone underestimates you, they're actually offering you the perfect chance to exceed expectations. At one such event, a young woman approached me afterward, tears in her eyes. "My husband just left me for his coworker," she confided. "He told me I'd never survive without him because I've just been a mom for the past 5 years. I was feeling hopeless until I heard your story." I took her hands in mine. The words people use to dismiss you don't define your potential. They reveal their limitations. Your story isn't over. It's just taking an unexpected turn. These interactions reminded me that success isn't measured solely by financial achievements or professional recognition. True impact comes from using your experience to light the path for others navigating their own darkness. When Lily turned 17 and began seriously researching colleges, she surprised me by expressing interest in both business and environmental science, a perfect blend of her parents' passions. "I've been watching both you and Dad," she explained, "as we toured university campuses. The way you turned your biggest setback into your greatest strength, and how Dad learned to admit his mistakes and grow from them. I want to build something meaningful too, something that makes a difference." Her words touched me deeply. Perhaps the most important outcome of my journey wasn't Phoenix Ventures or Evergreen's transformation, but the model of resilience and reinvention I'd provided for my daughter. During the fall of Lily's senior year, Thomas took me on a weekend getaway to Cannon Beach, the same coastal spot where Daniel and I had once sketched business ideas in the sand during happier days. As we walked along the shore at sunset, I realized how completely I had healed from the wounds of my past. "What are you thinking about?" Thomas asked, noticing my contemplative mood. "How life comes full circle in unexpected ways," I replied. "I once came here with Daniel to dream about future possibilities. Now I'm here with you, living a reality better than anything I could have imagined then." He smiled, squeezing my hand. "That's because you built this reality yourself, one courageous decision at a time." That evening over dinner, Thomas proposed. Not with grand gestures or elaborate speeches, but with simple authenticity, the quality I had come to value most in our relationship. "I love who you are," he said, "not despite your complicated history, but including it. Every challenge you faced has shaped you into someone extraordinary." When I called Lily to share the news, her excitement was immediate and genuine. "Mom, That's wonderful. Have you told Dad yet? I hadn't, but her question didn't create the anxiety it might have once caused. Daniel and I had reached a place where we could genuinely celebrate each other's happiness. When I did tell him, his response was warmly supportive. "Thomas is a good man," he said simply. "You deserve that." The wedding was intimate. Close friends, family, and colleagues who had been part of my rebirth story. Jessica served as my maid of honor, and to everyone's surprise, Daniel and his new partner attended as welcomed guests. "Quite the plot twist, isn't it?" he commented during the reception, gesturing to our unconventional blended circle. If someone had described this scene to me 6 years ago, I would have thought they were delusional. I laughed, appreciating his candor. Life has a way of humbling our certainties. "To your happiness," he said, raising his glass in a sincere toast, "and to unexpected journeys." As Thomas and I danced our first dance as husband and wife, I reflected on how profoundly my definition of success had changed over the years. Once, I had measured it by external markers, professional achievements, financial independence, proving critics wrong. Now I understood that true success lies in internal transformation, becoming someone who faces challenges with grace, who lifts others while rising, who finds strength in vulnerability. The following spring, as Lily prepared for graduation, she asked me to speak at her school's Women's Leadership Symposium. Standing before an audience of young women on the cusp of their own journeys, I shared the most important lessons from mine. True power isn't about controlling others or circumstances. It's about mastering yourself. It's found in choosing how you respond when life doesn't follow your plan. It's discovered when you refuse to let someone else's perception become your reality. The moments that seem to break you are often precisely the ones that make you. The divorce papers I received on my anniversary didn't end my story. They began a new chapter more authentic and fulfilling than the one before. Your value doesn't diminish because someone fails to see it, and sometimes the greatest gift is having to prove yourself all over again, because in that process, you discover strengths you never knew you possessed. Whatever challenges you face, whether it's dismissal, rejection, or loss, remember that they are not the conclusion of your story. They are merely plot twists in a narrative you ultimately control. The final chapters haven't been written yet, and the pen is in your hand. As I concluded my speech, I noticed Lily in the audience, her eyes shining with pride. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that the difficult journey had been worth every painful step. Not because it had led to professional success or personal vindication, but because it had shown my daughter the power of resilience, the possibility of redemption, and the truth that we are all, always, more than the boxes others try to put us in. Life continues to unfold in unexpected ways. Phoenix and Horizon's partnership has created opportunities neither firm could have developed independently. Thomas and I are building a life rich with purpose and connection. Daniel has found his true calling at Horizon and a relationship based on mutual respect rather than traditional expectations. And Lily is launching her own journey with confidence, born from watching her parents transform adversity into opportunity. The woman who once stared in shock at divorce papers across an anniversary dinner table now knows that endings are often disguised beginnings, that rejection can be redirection, and that sometimes the most powerful response to being underestimated is simply to rise. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.